The Flash is terrible. After receiving 2 amazing superhero films this year, it really is a shame that it is followed up by one of the worst superhero films and one of, if not the worst, DC movie of all time. Most would assume I'm being hyperbolic here, but I genuinely believe there is plenty of truth and stock to this claim. The Flash is so bad that I was in absolute awe on how bad they f***ed up. My expectations were low, but holy shit, this film is horrendous. This tarnishes not only the beloved character of Barry Allen, the Flash, but really reaffirms the cringe stereotype that all DC movies are just destined to be bad and fail in every sense. I will do my very best to address the bulk of my issues regarding this movie, the future of DC, and many more. Spoilers, obviously. If you do not want to have The Flash spoiled and wish to see this dumpster fire for yourself personally, then click off this video, as I'm covering everything that occurs within this film. Also, make sure to subscribe and like this video. Before I do proceed though, I want to address the biggest point that will no doubt be a really weak attempt to be dismissive of whatever I say during this video, and that is the old brain dead take of, you're just an MCU Marvel fanboy, you're just biased. Yeah, no. I actually like both Marvel and DC. I know, shocking. Apparently, it's illegal to like and follow both. You have to choose a side. I choose my side. But to really hammer it in, the first video on my channel is literally praising a DC film that I very much enjoy in The Batman, with one of my other videos defending Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman, and another one at the time showing support to Black Adam, which was unheard of, before James Gunn announced the reboot of the whole verse, hence why it's an outdated video, but still shows my consistency and showing love for DC movies. So good luck trying to portray me as solely a Marvel quote-unquote fanboy or DC quote-unquote hater, lol. The next cringe attempt to possibly downplay my criticisms is another embarrassing remark I see way too often, and that is, you're just a Snyder fanboy and cultist. Again, no, and even if I were, which I'm not, that should not take away from any criticisms with genuine reasoning behind it. Being oblivious and dismissive to solid evidence due to having a preference for a different director is very f***ing immature and childish. I'm personally indifferent towards Snyder, but more on the positive side, as I believe he had a lot of highs, but in the same light had some pretty bad lows. To be fair though, a lot of those are due to Warner Brothers' interference and their general mishandling of his work. But at the very least, he had a start to his extended story, which was building up to a conclusion that would have connected all the plot lines he was establishing. I don't know, I just really like it when a story has a start and a finish instead of being a disjointed mess, kind of like The Flash. Regardless, I'm not blind to his flaws in his past work, and can acknowledge when he messes up. Like I said, at the very least, he had a vision with a beginning and an ending, something DC is severely lacking post-Justice League. But, if you wish to cope by saying I'm just a Snyder fanboy, then go right ahead. It still does not save this actual poo of a film. Now that's out of the way, let's sink our teeth into why The Flash is fundamentally a bad superhero movie. Comedy. The comedy in this film kills all the seriousness in a Flash, no pun intended. It also kills many scenes where you're supposed to feel tension, ultimately eliminating any forms of real stakes being conveyed to the audience. The humor is so jarringly bad, and completely reliant on slapstick childish humor, goofy visuals, and forced MCU-esque jokes. Cause Lord knows, I and many others just love when DC movies show their own independence and their own identity by aping MCU-like punchlines from start to finish. Jokes aside, I seriously did not laugh at a single joke during the entire 2 hours and 24-minute runtime. I am not exaggerating, it is that bad. Barry's alternate self being reduced to an 18-year-old stoner-like child did not help this movie at all. His obnoxious ah ha 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 laugh throughout the entire fucking movie was so cringe and definitely not annoying or jarring at all. To be honest, that's how I pretty much feel about Barry too. He's kinda just a joke, and not a good one at that. Even in his quote-unquote serious moments, it's hard to take him seriously at all when the entire film has done nothing but reduce him to just a shitty punchline with no real compelling substance. I get that he's used for the main Barry to grow as a character, but there had to been other effective ways to have done so without damaging this movie's own quality and his own character. Like, you really just gonna have him as a comedic prop for the entire film? They unironically dumbed down this version of Barry 2 to a one-dimensional character for like 95% of the film. It unfortunately does sink it further down in the already deep abyss of bad writing, over-the-top acting, and non-existent quality. I'm absolutely certain that longtime Flash fans that adore his character, rogues gallery, and stories wanted more out of a Flash live-action movie instead of mostly being a comedy with basic and generic predictable superhero plotlines. I do believe the Flash should be witty and charming, but in this they really just overdo it. He's at his core so much more than just a quick haha punchline machine. All the complaints people previously had about Ezra Miller's depiction of the Flash, which mostly centered around his annoying aura and cringe comedy, seems to have been amplified by a whole lot, taken to new insane heights. It's as if they took the best qualities out of this version of the Flash and threw it right out the fucking window, but kept all the obvious bad traits and added way more of it. This is the worst outing of the Flash I've ever seen. I feel like saying otherwise is just delusional. The curse of comedy isn't just exclusive to Barry either. They somehow managed to use the power of cringe humor to ruin first and foremost Ben Affleck's depiction of Batman. Not only do they do this visually, but also in his acting and established character. It's a whole different fucking person at this point. He looks fucking ridiculous, especially in comparison to how cool and potentially interesting his character was in Batman vs Superman and potential future solo appearances. What a waste of something that could have been truly great, and for what? A cheap forced laugh reaction in a movie theater? Michael Keaton, although with some kinda cool scenes here and there, is also hit with the stick of cringe comedy. His character initially took a 180 for, you guessed it, humor. They have him appear as a homeless looking bum, who does goofy shit in his encounter with both Barrys, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense and is very pathetic to watch. And for whatever reason, they have him spewing reference lines from his past films, which doesn't fit at all in his scenes. His first death scene is also a massive joke, an unintentional one at that. Speaking of more cringe comedy, they reused a played out running character A touches lasso of truth and says embarrassing intrusive thoughts out loud to character B joke again. Yippee. It's pretty much impossible to tackle this film's poor humor without bringing up the now infamous baby saving sequence, which in my opinion is a prime example of this film's hyperfixation of comedy being an absurd and distracting detriment to any potential positive elements in this movie. It starts off with the Flash running up a building to save falling babies, a nurse, and a dog from a height that will surely end their lives if they were to land. We see cartoonish harmful objects closing in on the babies being framed in such a comical way it's impossible to take seriously, and does not help that it is complemented with PlayStation 2 graphics level of CGI. Later in this same scene, again during a fucking falling crisis of multiple lives at stake, the brilliant and amazing Andy Muschietti subverts the audience's expectations, as we see Barry stuffing his fucking mouth hole with food after food after food cause funny and unexpected, ha ha ha, silly eating montage during serious CGI baby saving moment, ha ha ha. Yeah, what a real cool and innovating way of annihilating any of the stakes that may have been present during this lengthy tiresome sequence, all because of a shit running joke. The sequence ends with Barry saving the day, with a background character and a nurse screaming her fucking lungs out so unrealistically in a goofy manner in a shitty attempt to elicit another forced classic Flash ha-ha moment. It is comically bad and honestly is one of the sequences of all time. Warner Brothers by now truly have to recognize that every single DC movie that has attempted to be Marvel-like in any form of fashion has failed again and again, time after time. It simply does not fit within the pre-established universe, and is honestly so bizarre how Warner Brothers and DC are still so fixated in copying their structure beat for beat. I feel like I could go on all day about the failed humor throughout the runtime, and how most if not all of the jokes of really awkward timing couldn't land even to save its own life. The overall use of comedy in this film really does hurt this movie a lot, and does not benefit it one bit. Its massive placement here again is an attempt to shamelessly copy the MCU formula, which historically, as I mentioned before, has never worked in DC's favor, but I guess they haven't learned their lesson yet, or maybe never will. The next big thing that totally takes myself and many others out of this movie is the CGI. To put it simply, the CGI is fucking dog shit. Which, whatever, right? But the issue here is, it is so prevalent in this film, it's impossible to ignore, and saying otherwise would have me thinking you work for the marketing team of this movie. The visuals and general cinematography fall in this category too. At worst, it's an absolute eyesore, and at best, it's pretty plain and forgettable. Aside from the overrated as hell title card in the beginning, I can't really think of a visually impressive scene that sticks out to me in a positive sense. The abomination that is the Flash visually is on par, if not worse, than 2000 superhero films in terms of CGI, with an outstanding budget of $220 million US. Do you know how insane that is? There is no justification behind this in any attempt to matter, because at the end of the day, that's how the movie will forever look like. There is no interpretation argument that changes that. It's very hard to be forgiving of something so glaringly bad, and doing so is sort of being disingenuous. The CGI in this movie extends to not just the suit, backgrounds, and powers, but the fucking character models on screen. Which is ironic, because I recall good old Twitter.com making fun of the Snyder Cut CGI Flash in a short post-credit scene, created of restricted post-production limits, whereas this CGI monstrosity of the same Flash is in a dedicated full-fledged motion picture, yet those Twitter users, funnily enough, are now remaining silent. I don't know if I'm the only one that noticed this, but this movie has a weird obsession of CGI babies. Like, there's a surprising amount of CGI Goo Goo Gaga babies in here. Maybe they're just appealing to their key supporters, who knows. But that's something that did catch my eye upon opening night. They also are cartoonishly goofy and really make this Flash's world feel like a joke and instantly breaks any form of immersion. The new suit is also really bad, both versions included. Even the story visually highlights how goofy Barry 2's new suit is, looking stupidly blocky and very bad in CGI sequences, which happens too many times that I've lost count. I hold a similar sentiment for the main Barry's new suit as well, giving a really cheap and flat look to it with bad choices in certain areas. The CGI doesn't help this either. I truly believe that he looked a million times better in his previous outings in the suit he was first introduced in. Even though I personally wasn't the biggest fan of that specific look, I can say with absolute confidence it smokes the new suits in this film without a doubt. Don't even get me started on the Dark Flash's suit. Not only did the suit get a downgrade in quality, but so did his powers visually, which is such a fucking letdown. They had one job at the very least, and that was to make the most appealing factor of his character visually work, and that is his speed, yet they fucked it monumentally. It's even worse considering this is an entire film dedicated to him and him alone as the center focus. He is the main character. This is his movie. How the fuck does his powers look and feel cooler in the movies he wasn't even the main character in? It's so absurd. The running in this movie is awful. They absolutely ruined it. It looks horrendous. Barry running in this movie is incredibly hard to watch. They took all the interesting appeal out of his powers visually and lore-wise from the prior films and made it look absolutely fucking ridiculous. Imagine waiting since the Justice League animated series for a live-action Flash film and to do justice for the character and his amazing rogue gallery just for them to fumble so incredibly bad. That's more than an entire decade for the super low-quality depiction. What a gigantic letdown to the massive amounts of Flash fans out there. Even in the dumbest sense of exclusively watching this movie with only caring about mindless action, powers, and fun, you don't get much at all from the Flash experience. Any one Snyder cutscene involving the Flash unironically has cooler and visually more interesting action and sequences than the entire Flash film, which is shocking. And I'm not even talking about the rewinding time scene, which they absolutely fucking butcher in this movie, by the way. Instead, I'm talking about any action or running segment from that version of the Justice League cut, which absolutely dominates in every sense compared to this movie in quality. It's not even a debate. As for the time travel, this film retcons it visually for no reason at all, stripping the impressive visuals, importance, and appeal from the iconic sequence to being a cringe coliseum of CGI models accessed by running on the spot in a bubble, which is just moronic. It's fucking stupid. Why? The once amazing and creative looking cinematography in the truly epic time travel scene in the Snyder cut of the Justice League reduced to continuously running on the spot, covered in again a bubble. Yes, really, a fucking bubble. They take all the seriousness away from it in service of fucking comedy and looking cheap. Snyder's version was so much better. Most, if not all, people who know of the cinematic version of The Flash have his time travel scene as his most known and unforgettable best moment and showing of his character. To backtrack on that and change it for the worse, and funnily enough I'm assuming for comedic purposes as well, does nothing but permanently damages this film's overall quality worse than it already is. But as well as The Flash, robbing him of one of his coolest and most interesting powers to be dumbed the f down and ruined, to be frank with all of you. Earlier in this video, I said this is the worst outing of The Flash ever. So much so, I truly believe it is one of the worst DC movies of all time. At least for now. But not only is this the worst Flash outing ever, but it also has the worst showcase of super speed ever done in the superhero live action setting, excluding TV budget-esque projects, you know what I mean. Avengers Age of Ultron unironically has better depiction of super speed, which is hilarious because Quicksilver is a fucking side character in that film. I really have to stress here how goofy the running looks, especially in comparison to the prior films. It really does stick out a lot in a bad way. It's done so tremendously wrong here. The entire film is based on speed of running. How do you fuck it up that bad? I wish it ended here, with shit comedy and shit CGI, but we have to address another elephant in the room, and that is the use of cameos. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it right now, all the cameos in this movie suck. All the cameos in the world can't save this movie. Let's start from the very first one being Ben Affleck. In his short appearance, his character is absolutely torn to shreds and is essentially a different person and is rocking the ugliest live-action Batman suit, which is rivaling Batnips in how bad it looks. Affleck's new suit feels clunky and out of place, with the unnecessary random holes and the random color swap from black and grey to a Batman brave in the bold blue, in a weird attempt to brighten the movie up and be more colourful in exchange for sacrificing visual consistency. It feels like a general cheap downgrade. Look how fucking clean it looked in Batman vs Superman compared to here. Such an astonishing downgrade visually, it's not even funny. Ben Affleck's Batman also feels more like a soulless voice of reason for Barry and exists just to spew exposition and jargon instead of being an actual developed character with compelling purpose or presence. I honestly feel as if new DC has a weird obsession of just shitting on Batman. This is best illustrated when he's holding the lasso of truth after being saved by our next cameo, Wonder Woman, with his immediate first words being, "My ego is far too big to say thank you." Which, aside from a poor attempt at comedy, I don't really get this oddly specific insult to his core character. Especially to this newer generation of Batman who is less rugged as he once was in Batman vs Superman and is very open to openly asking others for help and cooperating with them. Hell, I'll let the scene speak for itself.
Well, we could definitely use the help. So, glad you're here.
I don't know about you, but this sounds like he's pretty much indirectly saying thank you. So much for that my ego is far too big to say thank you bullshit. Just one of many examples of Andy Muschietti ignoring character consistency and sacrificing it in favor of poor comedy. Ben Affleck's depiction of Batman in this movie is to be essentially used as an insanely dumbed down plot device to create internal conflict within Barry to make the film move forward. Oh, that's it by the way, that's all there is to Ben Affleck's Batman, that's the last time you'll ever see him again. RIP to those who wanted a solo Ben Affleck Batman movie. His last appearance ever, reduced just to be in a shitty action sequence and to be a punchline to our second cameo guest, Wonder Woman. She comes in, assists the heroes, smiles, waves to the camera, and fucks off. This kinda happened in Shazam 2 as well. She's used as a quick prop with no greater purpose aside from being the supposed badass who kicks ass and is super awesome with a big smile and then just proceeds to fade out of the movie with nothing more to do. Which, to be honest, is pretty disrespectful to her character. Wonder Woman is so much more than just an on-screen prop, whose sole entire purpose is to do nothing else but be cartoonishly positive and kick ass for the sake of being the super force DCCU icon, and as well as to being a dismissive force of the whole DC's only dark and edgy narrative. Wonder Woman is unfortunately placed as nothing more than these force characteristics in this movie, given essentially nothing meaningful to do, where she's just in and out for 2 seconds, that's it. I feel as if Warner Bros and DC expect us to fucking lose our minds whenever she's on screen and they cue her soundtrack, when in reality she's just kinda there. It's not terribly surprising as it's become predictable at this point, with nothing really crazy going on, with no crazy reaction to be given at all. I'm deeply concerned if they're going to treat all of her future cameos like this. Our next one is Michael Keaton's old ass Batman, initially shown as a crazy retired bum, but then suddenly going back to his old ways when it's convenient for the movie. Look, if I'm being charitable, there is some cool action here and there involving him, but not enough to constitute in saying this movie is suddenly good because of it. He also has the most laughable first death ever, where his sacrifice is expected to garner an emotional reaction and have some meaningful sacrificial impact, but unfortunately it is in total vain as it accomplishes nothing. I kid you not, I was so shocked when I saw it for the first time on opening night. His second death was definitely more impactful, but regardless, he's in this movie to basically repeat what Ben Affleck said to Barry, explain the rules of time travel, aid Barry in freeing Supergirl, help give Barry his powers back, and to just die pretty much in an endless loop. Supergirl is for sure one of the more likable characters, where she's okay but generally feels unexplored and in essence is just used as a way to fast forward the barely present plot. Her role in this movie is also eerily similar to Michael Keaton's Batman, which I will explain. She has some cool action here and there, just like Michael Keaton, and initially does not want to aid our heroes, just like Michael Keaton, but switches her stance pretty quickly, just like Michael Keaton, which is followed up by a shockingly funny instance that was not intended to be funny at all, just like Michael Keaton. Do you see where I'm going with this? The unintentional funny instance in question is when she flew to the Batcave to take a barely breathing and burnt to a f***ing char Barry 1 to get struck by lightning without knowing the context of what they were doing. Remember and keep in mind that prior, she left quickly to rush to Zod, and came back somehow with full knowledge of what to do without much or if any explanation at all. You could say maybe superheroing, but the film does not go out of its own way to showcase this, so I'm not taking that excuse seriously. And even if I were to grant it, there is no reason at all she should feel compelled to dragonfly Barry's almost lifeless body to get hit by the full brunt of lightning without any of the equipment including the essential chemicals needed or proper procedures set up again. Keep in mind, she only luckily succeeded due to Barry 2 being there and being the switch that lit the fire that was getting the main Barry his powers back. Otherwise, she would have just murdered an innocent man in 4K for no real compelling reason outside at best a f***ing hunch. Supergirl in this movie also succumbs to the same fate as Michael Keaton's Batman, which is dying in an endless loop to Zod and his foes, nothing more. Their deaths hold no real emotional significant impact at all, especially the first Batman quote-unquote sacrifice. It feels hollow and too sudden for any person to truly care, with all the intended effects of sorrow and meaning getting thrown out the window immediately. as the film goes out of its own way to repeat their deaths in a continuous, quick, and repetitive cycle without a minute going by to mourn their initial passing and taking the emotional weight of it, which makes the audience desensitized to it all, which is not the intended feeling we should be having. This only gets worsened as Andy Muschietti decides to showcase the rest of Supergirl and Batman's deaths in CGI, cause I guess he couldn't be to film any more practical deaths, instead opting for the lazy CGI rendition route. It's pretty embarrassing that both these characters are regarded as the main appealing interest and coolest parts of the film overall in comparison to the Flash, when in reality they don't really do a whole lot and aren't given as much screen time as Barry. They're just essentially kinda there to move the plot forward and for Barry to realize his dumbass time traveling decisions are fucking stupid. Again, the fact they're regarded as the best characters in the whole film really says a whole lot about this movie's overall quality and how lame the main character is in comparison to his side cast, which is what they are in essence. Albeit the main side cast, they're still technically the side cast. The final set of cameos are in a short rush sequence that is plastered with cringe soulless CGI models, including the likes of Christopher Reeves as Superman, Helen Slade as Supergirl, Adam West as Batman, the 1950s George Reeves as Superman, Jay Garrick's Flash, and the cherry on top, Nicolas Cage as Superman. Does Warner Brothers truly think we want these characters to appear? That will go apeshit when they do appear, because us DC fans just love no dialogue CG fucking and old movie characters to appear out of thin air to do nothing but look at us, as if you couldn't be more obvious in saying, guys, look, it's the Thing, clap, it's a good movie, please. I don't typically like the whole cameo for an audience reaction moments anyways, but at least in other projects they make sense. They have a purpose aside from being a reference to a prior iteration, and in most cases aren't done in such a cheap manner to try and get a forced reaction. This is just so blatantly desperate. They abuse the cameos so much to a point where it's not a nitpick, it's valid criticism. Warner Bros. DC and Andy Muschietti are unironically appealing to the tiniest niche of these old movie fans in Twitter.com. Are you really gonna fucking tell me that Nicolas Cage's CGI Superman reveal is on the same level as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in No Way Home? Because that's how they want you to treat it as, same with Christopher Reeves. I'm just gonna be the first person to just outright say it, but nobody fucking cares about these old past iteration of DC characters anymore. Especially, let's say, in comparison to an Andrew Garfield reprising his role as Spider-Man again. People just don't give a fuck about Christopher Reeves as Superman anymore. I'm so tired of certain people and DC/Warner Bros. Acting as if they do, when most people just don't. DC really has to recognize why certain cameos work and why this film fails horribly at it. The sequences of these specific characters appearing in this movie is the prime example on how not to handle cameos. You have to realize these versions of characters are so dated, and in some cases just never existed. The reason a cameo like Tobey Maguire's and Andrew Garfield works is because 1, it works within the relevance of the scene and adds more to the film/story, and 2, because they're fresh on everyone's minds. People still remember them. The gap is not too massive, therefore being notable when they do appear, and effective since they are used with genuine purpose, which strengthens the overall story, which is simply not the case here. Like, let's be honest, no bullshit. Who really fucking knows or remembers and recently resonates with the fucking 50s George Reeves as Superman? It doesn't fit in with a greater purpose aside from being I know that guy/girl and understand that meta reference, which is lazy. You know it's bad when they're scraping at the bottom of the barrel when they're showcasing a version of Superman that never had a cinematic appearance in Nicolas Cage's Superman. Most likely due to social media talking about that obscure ass fact, which is insane to me. Think of it like this. Warner Bros. Is so out of touch that we unironically got Nicolas Cage's Superman and not a Man of Steel 2. That's actually nuts. What emotional reaction am I supposed to give seeing CGI Nicolas Cage? Like, tell me, wholeheartedly. I can maybe see Reeves as one with people who grew up on his films, but seriously, what the fuck am I supposed to feel from seeing him, aside from, oh yeah, I know about that time he almost played Superman. It's even worse knowing this cameo CGI dump was only done due to Marvel movies doing multiverse cameos. Like, is there genuine thought process, MCU do cameo, so we do cameo. MCU do multiverse, so we do multiverse. It's just so cringe and played out at this point. I don't really care for the cameos at all, which is not the reaction I should be having. Being disappointed in cameos that are contingent on knowing obscure DC fun facts is disappointing, and drags this film further down the bottomless hole. The final cameos in this movie is first fucking George Batnip's old ass Clooney as the new main Batman now, which is the dumbest thing ever and kills my excitement for any future DC movies involving Batman. And the last one being a Jason Momoa post-credit scene of Arthur Curry sleeping in a puddle, which is most definitely peak humor, with Barry being there not seemingly giving a single flying about getting rid of Affleck's Batman. You know, the guy who in his own words is his quote-unquote best friend, but fuck it I guess. 2023's The Flash is dependent, disrespectful, and a downgrade of previously established canon stories and characters. Henry Cavill, aka the man who started the DC universe with Man of Steel, is only shown as a CGI figure from behind on a small news screen in Guatemala for a split second, and as well as a second time as a sand CGI statue, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. What a way for his character to go out, huh? Getting done dirty again, which is crazy. This movie tries its best to avoid Henry Cavill, when in reality he had plenty of places to appear and make his final cameo, which would have sort of sucked, but at least he could have gone out with some dignity, and possibly added a meaningful cameo to this film instead of being a headless CGI model or body double man again. But we all know why that obvious choice wasn't the case, and it most likely has to do with Warner Bros. And how they truly feel about Henry Cavill. DC, WB, and The Flash took a whole shit on his verse that he started and disrespectfully got rid of his iconic character for good. But even with all that clear disdain and disrespect for Henry, this movie is ironically so extremely dependent on Man of Steel plotlines and their characters to make the shitty film even move forward at all. Pretty much being used in all of the marketing and trailers, which again is just so ironic. Who would have thought 10 years ago we'd be seeing a shittier Man of Steel in a Flash movie? Or even the quality of DC film we ended up digressing into and becoming accustomed with a decade later. Truly embarrassing. For those who are just being purely oblivious to what I'm stating, here's a clear example of an obvious instance of a downgrade between a prior established film and this one. Take a look at this scene from 2016's Batman vs Superman. We immediately see this version of traveling back in time being handled with much more care, respect, and seriousness. It even looks cleaner and cooler visually. It establishes how time travel is chaotic and difficult. Nothing easy that can be done off a whim. We're also seeing it being used with so much more purpose and meaningful impact that plays a crucial aspect to the rest of those films and other characters' decision making that extends to more than just one film. Versus this pre-established, ugly canon-breaking version of it in every sense. From the ridiculous visuals being for the sake of comedy, the still frozen calm it never had, and even the portal looking completely different in a worse way, and for what? Displaying this once shown difficult feat being able to be done at the whim of any user, experienced or not, with the speed force of Barry 2 being able to spam it with incredible ease, killing any form of seriousness it once had. He didn't even train. Without Michael Keaton's Batman, Sasha Calle's Supergirl, and Man of Steel plot points, the second and third act simply does not exist. Meaning, two other DC IPs are crucial to the existence of this story. Without it, we don't get the Flash movie. Think about that. This makes it feel like a disjointed hybrid film, which forces you to remember the Flash plot at the very end, out of nowhere and abruptly. I find it truly ironic that Andy is so dependent and reliant on other DC movies, callbacks, and Man of Steel to make a solo Flash film even somewhat watchable, rather than exploring and utilizing the Flash's vast array of villains and storylines. Speaking of storylines, this film is heavily based on the most iconic Flash story ever, that being Flashpoint, and they absolutely fumbled it in every sense. What really could have been one of the most grand and amazing epic stories they could have ever depicted if they had strictly followed the insanely beloved Flashpoint story to a T. They seriously could have copied every page, every plot point and all, and would have 100% produced a much more memorable, well-received and overall better movie in every sense of the word. What this movie could have been had it adhered to being a strictly standalone story, independent and void of cameos, competent in their own main character, and massive plethora of infinitely more interesting Flash stories to tell instead of the dumpster fire one we got instead. It's instead reduced to a rushed time travel movie with some plot points from the beloved story that were never going to get adapted properly to live action ever again. That was it. It took out everything cool and appealing about Flashpoint to construct their own abomination, barely using any aspects of the story aside from some plot points to pad out the film, ultimately ending up with an insanely watered down version. A story many fans cherish wholeheartedly tampered to death to the point it is completely foreign to the source material. And all because they wanted to erase the previous verse that had a decade of established stories and unresolved plot lines. Also, how the fuck does the Snyder Cut's Justice League have a more visually accurate depiction of Flash traveling back in time like in Flashpoint compared to the fucking movie based off fucking Flashpoint? Ironically enough, this film is trying its absolute fastest to reach the reset button ending to segue into the new DC cinematic universe. They sacrificed so much, including the entire Flashpoint story just to shield a new DC movieverse, which is so disrespectful and the waste of a solo movie for a character like Barry Allen. Also, there goes the Snyderverse, what could have been. The film even goes out of its own way to disrespect its main antagonist by barely being present at all. I'm not joking about the villain being barely present, by the way. He only shows up once in the early stages when Barry travels back in time, and does not appear to the fucking final act about 2 hours into the movie. You know, the same movie that's less than 2.5 hours. The only other instance was like a 2-second CGI comically goofy jump scare, which had no impact at all. His last on-screen moment being fading into dust with no after-lasting impacts. What an antagonist, ladies and gentlemen. Also, everyone knew who he was from a mile away, even before seeing the film, so that reveal is incredibly underwhelming. Dark Flash, dumbass name by the way, is such an unforgettable, ugly CGI monstrosity with no real appeal. He doesn't command any scene he's in, even though he's the focus villain in the climax, and is very silly overall. Dark Flash is honestly just a shittier fucking Avatar. I'm not even joking. I'm actually dumbfounded that a CW series take of a darker Flash is unironically better in terms of design, intimidation, and overall coming off as a better antagonist. Keep in mind, CW's The Flash is a television series with an incredibly questionable budget, whilst 2023's The Flash is a full-fledged fucking movie. General Zod honestly felt like a more impactful villain, and he's not even the main primary fucking antagonist. The Dark Flash as an antagonist is so lackluster and barely present throughout the whole movie that the alternative version of Barry Allen's laugh had more memorable on-screen presence to me, and that's only due to being audibly loud annoyance. I'm genuinely lost by those who praise this film in spite of Zack's movies, or just under the pretenses of just have fun man, turn off your brain man, which is just stupid. Like, how is your film any good if the main character, according to those who, for whatever reason, are praising this film, isn't even the highlight of the movie, and is getting hard carried by Man of Steel plotlines and a pre-existing Batman from the 80s? Do you see how ridiculous this all is? It, like many things in this movie, doesn't make sense. Let's start this section with a bang, by asking the biggest unanswered question in this movie, and that is, where the fuck is the Reverse Flash? You know, his arch nemesis? You know, the guy who iced Barry Allen's mother? You know, a massive key character of the Flashpoint story, aka what this movie is based on? Speaking about Mr. Reverse Flash, how does having Barry's dad home instead of getting a tomato can stop the Reverse fucking Flash from killing Barry's mother? Someone please explain it to me, and don't hit me with the, well, actually, Barry changed time, so he never existed due to those time-tampering events. Yeah, Reverse Flash can exist out of time-tampering events, especially on a day he's confirmably present and being there, so I'm at a loss there, buddy. Are you seriously telling me that Reverse Flash got fucking fear-hacked by Big Barry Allen's dad? Really? You really want to tell me that? There's not even a hint of his character at all, not even a fart, outside of Barry's mother being stabbed by we don't know what, because you could be devil's advocate and say, well, that just means she was murdered by someone else. Which is wrong, because you have to concede to two possibilities. One, the Reverse Flash was most likely and definitely the one who killed her, as he's done in all representation of that night where Barry lost his mother. Or two, the Flash movie doesn't give two shits about the origin of her death, where it's pretty much always Reverse Flash killing her, with even the film making the implication something unhumanly fast led to her death, as the father was arriving at the driveway as she was screaming with the perpetrator gone as if he was never there. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? So you tell me, because it sounds like they just did not give a fuck about addressing this massive issue at all. Why wouldn't the Reverse Flash just kill his mother regardless and easily frame his father? Why does him being there stop him from doing that? Did Barry not think this out at all? He really confidently thought his dad being there stops this mysterious murder? Really? There's so many unanswered variables that just get ignored when they shouldn't. That's a plot hole, a massive one at that. You can't just ignore something so glaringly obvious. Something else that really stuck out to me that could have avoided this entire movie is why didn't Barry just fast forward back to the present once he saw his alternate self from a big distance? He automatically recognized he was in the wrong time and yet felt compelled to interact with him, even though he had been told that even the most fucking minute change can drastically change the present. Some may argue and try to justify his obscene decision due to wanting to find out the time and date, but that's just dumb. He could have done so in numerous ways without flat out interacting with the other version of himself. For example, finding a newspaper, phone, calendar, and so many more safer and practical options which he can do in a moment's notice due to having fucking super speed. Doing so would have prevented this film from happening at all. It seems very contrived that he interacted with the other Barry so they could lazily force the plot to take place. Another one might be the moral dilemma from the Black Zero event, but he wasn't aware of that, so that doesn't make any sense for doing what he did. A major point that doesn't really make sense is Barry firsthand seeing the consequences of messing with time, and yet still messes with time at the end of the movie, and then surprised Pikachu faces when he sees George Clooney as Bruce Wayne. Like, did he learn nothing? What was the point? It goes against his character arc. It's dumb as fuck. Why give him that realization with that forced hugging closure scene, which is also tampering with time, just for him to further tamper with time for his own selfish benefit? It makes that realization he gets at the climax redundant. It makes Barry 2's sacrifice redundant. It makes everything in this movie fucking redundant. It's meaningless. He just fucks with time at the end. What does it matter? What am I supposed to take from this movie if he goes against his core progression? For all I've been shown, Barry Allen has just been consistently a fucking moron from start to finish, with his only admirable choices being undone by his acts he's well aware of not to do. What have I genuinely learnt about his character that isn't surface level? It's almost as if this film is entirely pointless aside from resetting shit, which even getting to that point was so contrived and unnaturally forced. A very big specific instance of this film being insanely contrived funnily occurs at the end of the movie, where the now supposedly resolved Barry cannot help himself or contain his selfish urges and interacts with the past iteration of his mother, pretty much getting a fucking pep talk from her in an attempt to gather some form of closure, which is accomplished by moronic means. The ridiculousness of this unnatural interaction occurring is even acknowledged by the fucking movie with the following line: "I know I'm just a random lady in the store. Do you want a hug?" Where she proceeds to start mothering, by her own admission, a complete random adult stranger she does not know. I've seen some people praising this scene, but you've got to realize it's achieved due to a huge glaring messy contrivance, which is too hard to ignore and doesn't make sense. Kind of like this entire film, where things that shouldn't happen just happen. It's also a real shame that destroying most of the serious aspects built up thus far in the live action Flash appearances in favor of having a childish cartoon-like tint from start to finish. I kid you not, most if not all the aspects of this film is shockingly cartoonish, and not in an endearing paying respect to the former animated series kind of way, which really does take you out of the movie. I feel this is best shown in the first baby saving sequence, where its peak cartoonish nature is on full display. Showcased from the ridiculous visuals, extremely animated like character actions, goofy ass setups and payoffs, and even being complemented with a cartoon-like soundtrack throughout the entire sequence. To be completely honest, I am in absolute utter disbelief that Twitter.com is really trying to mindlessly gas and hype this movie up to delusional degrees, and push it as the new standard of what we should be getting from now on, which is a truly terrifying and worrying thought for all future DC projects to come. Especially knowing how out of touch Warner Bros. Is and how much they love and cave to the opinion of random Twitter user 24 on how to deal with the entire DC cinematic universe, as they themselves haven't got a single clue on what to do, and are real flip-floppy when it comes to consistency, as evident with this movie. I find it amazing that the most common parroted rebuttal in defense of this movie, and the only response to all the obvious glaring fucking visual problems and all the countless things that are wrong in this movie, is to simply turn off your brain and quote-unquote just have fun. I think it's real fucking fun seeing a character I truly love and care for sink to its demise in every facet. The whole just turn off your brain and have fun argument is laughable first and foremost, and even if we were to entertain it, it still doesn't work to compensate for all the consistent issues from start to finish, and should never be expected out of the audience to turn off all of their critical thinking. All the good you could potentially muster up in a desperate attempt to look the other side away from the hard truth of this film's quality and obvious overwhelming flaws still does not do enough to even make this film serviceable. And to be honest, it really speaks volumes when you have to pull that lazy code card out of your back pocket to somewhat justify any form of good in this nightmarish shit show. Are we really at a stage where we're just giving fucking participation awards for superhero movies now? It doesn't make sense to praise a movie just for existing. This entire movie, from beginning to end, is so cartoonishly over the top, you'd honestly think you're watching a different series entirely from the previously established verse, and even as its own distinct property disconnected from the prior films, it is still a very egregious factor that is jarringly cringe and childishly cartoonish in a non-flattering way that does this film no favours. The Flash is a horribly incoherent and poorly directed film with little to no substance at all that falls completely flat. I really cannot find any compelling factors that stand out to me without doing mental gymnastics, and even so, there's nothing amazingly great to find or even consistent throughout the whole film. At its absolute peak, it's barely surface level in terms of compelling depth. I couldn't fake praise this film even if I had a gun to my head, it's just that bad. Barry Allen is a cartoonishly alien, one-dimensional, awkward, and unrealistic antisocial protagonist that I cannot resonate with on any level, aside from at best, surface level. Barry also for the most part feels more like a background character gets outshined by a side cast in his own solo film, as even the presented antagonists aren't even really Barry antagonists till the very end, which gets resolved insanely briefly and is given little to no light. Iris West, who is supposed to be a main romantic interest and character of importance, also isn't really given a whole lot to do, yet the film acts like we're supposed to care and be super invested, with most of their supposedly long relationship being rushed and shoved down our throats, with poor execution and awkward dialogue, as if that's enough to be considered an effective showing of their supposed long and meaningful relationship, which it simply isn't based on what we have been shown. Barry's two main friends also don't do much at all throughout the film and are mostly used as comedic props for cheap laughs, which seems to be the film's main fucking prerogative. Aside from that, they aren't really giving anything meaningful to do, but low-key are competing and going relative with the main fucking villain of the movie in terms of screen time. Most of the plot points and even the big twist of the film are incredibly predictable and easy to catch on. The biggest example being the main antagonist identity, which was correctly predicted before even the film was released. Barry messing with time doesn't help at all, and it's insane that even after everything, he didn't learn his lesson. especially after being warned multiple times of the consequences and seeing firsthand the ramifications of tampering with time travel and how it can destroy the entire multiverse. I truly believe films like Joss Whedon's Justice League are unironically better than The Flash, even though I absolutely loathe that film. You could even argue that 2016 Suicide Squad's even better, which is just a testament to the absolute trash quality of The Flash. I can see why others would like it, resonate with the characters, enjoy the soundtracks, even gain something out of those movies. With The Flash, it's just pointless and disrespectful in every sense. How are you supposed to take this movie seriously when it doesn't even take itself seriously? Another major issue I had with The Flash is the dialogue. The dialogue in this film is atrocious and is mostly nonsensical comedic filler. There are a lot of segments where it's just non-stop cringe attempts at landing jokes and spewing nonsensical and non-relevant words for the sake of padding out the scene. This bleeds into the character's actions as well. A prime one that really stuck out to me being Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne shoving a spoon of pasta sauce in Barry's mouth after he had tasted it, which just seems so stupidly out of character and out of nowhere for no reason at all, aside from a really bad attempt at comedy which sacrificed character consistency for a bottom line cringe and childish joke. This film is also not very on the nose, typically highlighting things that really didn't need to be audibly or visually pointed out. A really big example of this is at the end of the film where we see Barry go back to his apartment after patching the mistake responsible for creating the plot. It's fairly obvious, yet Andy thinks so little of the audience's intelligence, he forces Barry to say out loud, while alone, "I'm back." There's an old basic film saying that goes along the lines of show don't tell, which as this example shows, clearly isn't being adhered to for this major instance and throughout from start to finish aside from some very few minor basic instances. For those who are not really understanding, imagine abruptly resetting the MCU before Infinity War, with the last Marvel film being a disrespectful shit show that means nothing in the grand scheme of things, aside from resetting everything that's been built up to that point. Imagine how people would react to that if the MCU got hit with the reset button, just because of Twitter.com and pretentious critics who follow a crowd. It would be utterly insane and impossible to ignore. The Flash ends on a cartoonish note, with Barry's two falling out, which wow, what a really memorable and impactful meaningful ending. Ending like a fucking Looney Tunes sketch was definitely the way to go. It really does stand out amongst the endings of all time. What a joke, what a film, what a mess, what a tragedy for DC. James Gunn blindlessly praising and co-signing this film's supposed quote-unquote quality is such a bad sign for DC to come. If I'm being super charitable here, the only way I can even somewhat rationalize James Gunn's decision to continuously praise and hype the shit out of The Flash is most likely so DC does not take a massive financial loss and salvage as much as they can from this inevitable shit show it was bound to be via problematic deception by misleading its quality prior to release. It honestly has me worried. I'd like to be optimistic and say new DC is going to be perfect or amazing, and it's not outright impossible for that to happen, but this is not a good sign at all, I'll tell you that much. It's even worse considering that Andy Muschietti, the director of this movie, is going to be directing the new Batman movie, which I don't even know how the fuck they're gonna do with George Clooney being the main Bruce Wayne, but I guess we'll see. If you like this movie, even knowing the issues, that's totally fine and whatnot, but I and many others just can't ignore the obvious pile of damaging flaws with this film. Even though I'm vocal in my disappointment and genuine disgust of this movie, I do so in hopes that we don't get more films like this. I strongly believe we should hold bad movies and companies accountable, instead of just rating it high because characters throw a cool kick and a cool punch. My expectations for The Flash were low, but like every film I watched for the first time, I wanted to be genuinely good overall. I don't take satisfaction from these movies being dog shit. It's not fun to be immensely disappointed or to expect a bad product prior to even seeing it. I want the best for the characters I love and grew up with. Hell, I even bought the Flash popcorn and cup bundle showing the love I have for these characters. I was even willing to lower my harsher critical side of me with a sliver of potential hope that maybe, just maybe, it won't be as bad as I thought it'd be. Unfortunately, it was worse. Way worse than I could ever anticipate. A real monumental fuck up that should be looked back on in the near future on what not to do with a beloved character in a beloved verse. But, to conclude, The Flash in all honesty is the worst DC movie ever, without a doubt.
Leave me alone!
Time's myself.